Hi, I'm Tylor Paige. I write horror romance. You may know me from the slasher romance Slasher Pass, and I have an upcoming traditionally published novel called Good for Her coming soon.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I'm sitting down with author Tylor Paige. You may know her from her Final Girls series, including the hit book Slash or Pass. Tylor is a horror romance author whose books are self-aware and playful, while still telling a solid, scary story that is hopelessly romantic and hopelessly haunted. She writes stories where the villains are definitely still villains, but they deserve their love stories too, and you might find yourself rooting for them. We'll talk about what inspires her to write certain characters, the impact of a lifetime of reading V.C. Andrews and Stephen King, and all about her journey from indie to traditional publishing. Make sure to stay to the end to hear Tylor's vulnerable and inspiring love letter that she wrote for her readers. Tylor, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
I'm really excited to be here too. I know when my agent sent me the message, I was like very excited. The whole premise is really fun.
Thank you. Well, I cannot wait to talk about your writing and specifically the book that introduced me to you. So I would love to just start right there. I picked up this book, Slash or Pass, and I didn't really know what to expect. I dove in and I loved it. I was obsessed. So let's just start with that book. What is the premise of that book and who are the main characters?
So Slasher Pass, the main premise, I always feel like I get this wrong because what I think is the main premise isn't exactly what readers do. To me, Slasher Pass is just a slasher. It's a movie put on page. At the time of I was writing it, I didn't really think I was putting too much depth into it, but a lot of people they really focus on the religious aspects of the book because it's centered around three children who escape a religious cult, and even though it's been 10 years and they're all adults now, they're still being not attacked, but they're not free from that cult. It's still affecting their current adult lives in the form of one of the people in the cult coming and killing all of her friends. Um,
Oh, that.
so
Yeah,
yeah, just that piece. Yeah,
just
I always
that.
forget that there's like a religious aspect to it, and that's the piece that a lot of people focus on. And I often forget that that's part of the book.
Well, I absolutely loved the story and I loved the direction you took us in. There were so many elements to it, but I also love how you're almost saying it's like a movie on a page. And there was this story within a story aspect in the book, which was also really interesting. And then we have our three main characters, and we're following their journey from childhood to adulthood as they're trying to navigate this post cult life and just live like adults while they've had this wild experience in childhood. So, can you tell us a little bit more about Kansas, Constantine, and Isley?
So I think they came about from like at its very based roots. That I wanted them to be inspired by the original movie Scream, which is the characters are Billy, Stu, and Sydney, and that's kind of how I marketed it at first. I was like, "Did you ever want to read a book featuring these three characters where they're all together?" But they quickly morphed into their own completely separate characters. That they are remnants of that original pitch. Isley is like she's like a goth queen. She's like what every girl kind of dreams of being, but it's being a goth is kind of expensive. you know? So like I gave her the Adams family kind of fancy house and she got to decorate it however she wanted and she gets to dress how she wants. And Kansas, he's my little smart guy. He's got the glasses, which I know is like kind of cheesy. Oh, he's a computer nerd who has glasses. But I still love him. And then Constantine is he is a villain, of the story. And well, both Kansas and Constantine are, but I think Constantine's a little bit darker. And Constantine's just his own beast. It's hard to describe my own characters though sometimes.
Oh, I find that happens so often. And as readers, we're looking through our own filter, right? So, you're saying villains. I'm like, well, they're the villains I rooted for. And I was so excited as I was reading the book. I was cheering them on, which says a lot about me. But I loved their dynamic and I loved where he took us in the story. And I just wanted to explore a little bit of the elements that were in that book, right? So, for readers, it's like there were so many things I noticed in your writing. It was so rich. Every time you're writing a scene, I know what the room smells like. I know, like, I feel like I'm there with them. And there are so many details about Isley's personality. So you're even saying, like, oh, she's like this goth girl. And it's like, oh, there's so much texture to her. Like you know so much about her interests, right? Which sometimes does not happen when we write women characters. And instead, in this book, we learned so much about her, her fears, her wants, things she's struggling with. And I just thought it was really interesting how you were able to, I don't know, create such a rich character that we're rooting for, we're frustrated with, we want to know what's going on, we want to understand what is the dynamic between these three people, and ultimately, like, what do we want for them? So, what goes into that for you, right? When you're writing these characters that have flaws, depth, color, texture, what are you taking into account or what's inspiring you as you're coming up with these characters?
Well, I think I learned a lot from reading VC Andrews. I don't know if you've read
I've
that
read
person's books.
everything. I
Okay,
grew
so
up
that
I VC Andrews was the woman who raised me in the schoolyard. I definitely read those books with my girlfriends. You would have been sitting in our circle and I would have taught you how to play poker. So yes.
yes. So VC Andrews, I was obsessed with VC Andrews. I actually recently finally got rid of my couple hundred book collection. It was really hard. I wrote fan fiction for VC Andrews. I started a podcast once. It didn't go well, but I'm a huge VC Andrews fan. VC Andrews is very formulaic. I always used to tell people that the main character, the main female character, the person who was writing those books gave them a hobby, gave them like A, B, and C. It was very cookie cutter. They just changed the names of everything. But when I was going into my own writing, I was like, okay, well, I wanted to make sure like they need more than just that she's falling in love. I wanted her to be have all of my final girls characters to feel like they were real people with more wants and needs and some kind of personality to make them stand out because if they're all kind of the same, then it's really hard to remember that book from a different book. Readers are very voracious. For instance, my cousin, she is a huge mafia romance reader, but she reads so many of them. She can't tell you what the titles are or who wrote them because they are all so similar, which is like a good thing, but it also, from a marketing standpoint, it makes it a little bit difficult because no one's able to tell what that book is, or name that book. And so I really wanted it to be able, with all my Final Girls books, for them to be able to say, oh, well, the girl does this and it's very specific so that you could remember that's what that book is.
Oh, well, I think that that really came across because I felt like I knew this girl. And, it's so interesting because she was so rich and there's so much mystery around the guys. They have a lot of secrets. And it's so interesting that you get to see so much of Isley and there's like so much of the two guys that are a little bit in the background. But I really, really enjoyed it. And clearly it stood out to me because I reached out to you. I read tons of books in the genre and I could not wait to talk to you about this one in particular. And I'm wondering, as a reader who that was my entry point, where do you encourage readers to go in your catalog after that? So, someone has found you and fallen in love with your writing. What are some other books that you would recommend that people check out?
Well, so horror romance is what I feel like I do well. Slasher Pass did really well, and I've made kind of a home there. I did write a mini sequel to Slasher Pass, so if you really love Isley, Kansas, and Constantine, there is a mini novella called Thots and Prayers that you should read. But I would say just go right down the list of the Final Girls. and just go from there. I did write one dark romance, and I am very proud of it. And I love it, but it's like my most recent publication, but it is not the same vibe as Slasher Pass or any of my other ones. So I really kind of warn people that if you liked Slasher Pass, don't go into my most recent book thinking it's the same thing, because there is a very distinct difference between dark romance and horror romance. And I don't want people to be their expectations to be that. That book is called Beautiful Little Freaks. It is a Great Gatsby retelling.
Well, I think that's next on my list. I'm really excited about that. And I actually have a question about something you just said. I'm wondering what that's like for you as a writer. When you have these stories within you and they maybe take a little bit of a turn from a genre where you have a home, what is that like for you? Do you have that moment inside where you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't step outside of the box, or maybe people won't like it? How do you get yourself to that space where you just say, no, I'm creating what I want and I'm just going to keep putting it out there?
This book was very hard for me because I knew that it was going to be a dark romance, not a horror romance. In Slasher Pass and my final girls books, there's a lot of sarcasm and what I find funny. There's a lot of funny moments in there. In my Gatsby romance, there's very little humor. It's a very serious piece. But I also, with warning readers of their expectations, I also kind of reined back my expectations too. I knew that long-term readers of me may not enjoy a more serious piece, so I had to acknowledge and accept that it's probably not going to be the next Slasher Pass. And it wasn't, and it's totally fine. I recently have been agented, and I knew that some good things were coming, and I really have always wanted to write a Gatsby romance. It's been like on my bucket list. So I kind of said, okay, this may be the only time I get the opportunity to do this. So I'm going to publish it anyways. And people do really enjoy it. But I knew going in that it wasn't going to see the success that like Slasher Pass had.
Well, I think it's really interesting to talk about that just because I feel like there's a lot of parallels, even for people in other creative fields, even if they're not writers, but there's always that moment when you, I don't know, check yourself or second guess yourself. And I really
Yeah.
love that you put it out there. And then you also said, no, I'm going to acknowledge to my audience, like, hey, this is not going to be that, but it's still part of me. Like, this is still my creative process that I'm putting out there, which I think is really interesting. And it's an important thing to talk about because I don't know, I guess, 2025, I think sometimes we can perceive ourselves through filters and almost feel like, oh, I don't want to step out of the algorithm, right? And I think it's really beautiful when you just kind of let the creativity lead you. So I'm really excited about that book. And I mean, a Gatsby retelling? Absolutely. So from someone who grew up on VC Andrews. So this combination is working for me. I really, really love it. One thing that really stood out to me when I was looking at your bio was this line, and you said, I'm drawn to the darkness where the villains are still villains, but they deserve love stories too. And I just wanted to drop into that space for a second where you've kind of made your home, where like even I shared at the beginning of the episode. So they're the villains, but I'm rooting for them. I want them to get the girl. I want everything to work for them. So why does that storytelling appeal to you?
I'm not sure why it appealed. I think it's because I just really love the horror genre. Like I've always been really big into horror, and I think that's the difference between dark romance and horror is that oftentimes in dark romance, there's like a redemption arc, or there's like a big reason why they are bad, why the male main characters are bad, and things like that. But in horror romance, they just stay bad. There doesn't have to be a reason why they're bad, but they're just going to stay in that space. There's no real growth. I mean, there can be, but there doesn't have to be. And I guess it just appeals to me just because I love horror so much, and that's kind of like the standard in the
Mhm.
genre.
Oh, I love that. Makes a lot of sense too. I'm wondering where your love of horror came from. Do you have the lore? Do you have the story, the first book, the first movie? What was the thing that just piqued your interest in this genre?
So, first book, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is common, but just Stephen King. In general, I still collect his first editions to this day. I did a lot of Stephen King when I was in middle school. I collected VCRs and Stephen King. Every summer, I would go to the library and what is it? Not rent. Is it rent?
Take out, I guess I would say.
Yes, take out. Yeah, I would take out Firestarter and read it. That was like my first kickoff of the summer, every summer through for like quite like 4 or 5 years. And then as far as movies go, I think I was just like always watching them. And then, well, my husband, he enjoys them too. So that became our kind of norm of just watching movies and like analyzing them and like listening to fun facts or I listen to a lot of podcasts. Sorry, that's why I said listening to fun facts or hearing fun facts about the movie industry and stuff like that. And then it just kind of, it was like a slow growth or the Twilight Zone. Maybe it's the Twilight Zone now that I'm thinking about it. Because I used to watch a lot of Twilight Zone.
Honestly, I feel like you and I would have been best friends in middle school. And because you just basically summed up all of my summers, everything that I did and everything I read and watched. And I just had this flashback of something else we used to do in middle school. And that is my best friend and I would set up a horror scene in her house. So we would take out like the first aid kit and like spray betadine and put like gauzes and like make her little siblings sit there and like wrap them up. And then we would
Oh my gosh.
invite a classmate over and be like, "Oh my God, this just happened." So you would have hung out with us
I
and had a
love
great time.
this.
We just created
It sounds like it.
we just wanted to traumatize other children with horror scenes because we loved it. I grew up on like Friday the 13th and Halloween and all of those movies. I just really, really loved them. And yes, I read Stephen King as well. And so there was always that, I don't know, that like fear factor in the movies that gets to you. And what is the name of that book that I feel like we all read when we were in elementary school? It's that like horror book for children, which was terrifying. I'll think of the name as soon as we're done, but it's like the white book with the black illustration.
Yes. Scary stories to tell in the dark, I
Yes,
think.
that is the book that
Yes.
raised me. That book raised me. It's who I am to my bones, and which is probably why I loved your book so much because I remember that that's what we would take camping and we would like always read those things and it just kind of gets in your bones. So even to this day, I love those stories. So obviously I love Slasher Pass and I am so excited about the Great Gatsby-esque book that you mentioned, which I will definitely be reading. But I would love to hear more about the exciting projects that you have going on.
Yes, I actually recently got picked up by a traditional publisher. They are Page and Vine, and they are distributed by Simon and Schuster. I got a two-book deal, and the book that has already been announced is called Good for Her. It's a play on the Good for Her genre of horror, which is like mostly just revenge horror, but it's set in Hollywood. And Evie, her mother was a final girl in her heyday and she was murdered on set 5 years ago. And then Evie, after her mother's murder, she leaves town because she just doesn't want to deal with it. She doesn't want to deal with Hollywood anymore. But now 5 years later, she's come back because they are revamping the horror franchise that her mother was the star of. They're bringing that series back, and they want her to star in it. And she's like, "Yes, absolutely, I will star in your film." But what she doesn't tell people is she's actually there to get revenge on all the men who killed her mother.
I'm ready for this
Oh,
book. I'm really
yeah,
excited
and
about that. When does that coming
it's
out?
so good. So that one, because it is traditionally going to be traditionally published, trad takes a little bit longer. So the publishing date is April 28th of next year, which is about a year to the day almost of when I signed the contract. So it's actually kind of quick for traditionally publishing. Typically, it's about 18 months. So, I mean, I'll take it. But I got a year to
Yeah.
promote it. So,
Can I pick your brain about what that's like to be picked up by a publisher? What does that feel
yeah,
like?
it feels really, really good. It's when I started publishing, it was never really a dream of mine at the time. I always said I would never go traditionally published, but then, Slasher Pass became a breakout book and my goals changed into not necessarily monetary based as much as long term. I would like this not to be just be like a quick career, which it never wanted to be a quick career, but like now I would like to retire as a writer in 40 years. Traditionally, publishing would help me in those goals for myself. And it was a very big surprise. I got picked up fairly quickly. I was writing my Gatsby book at the time, and I asked my agent if she wanted it. I said, this is the book I'm working on. Do you want Gatsby? And she said no, which was not surprising because I've tried to pitch Gatsby to so many people. No one ever wants it. It's fine. So I wasn't surprised in that, but then I told her, I said, I've got this other idea. And I gave her just like a quick, maybe a blurb, if that. And my agent said, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the book. Stop Gatsby, write this book. And I said, well, I can't do that. That's not how that works because I have deadlines and I have people who are excited for it. But she kind of poked me quite a bit. And I got the first 13 chapters out. And so we went on submission. Maybe 3 weeks later, if that, I was given an offer that I decided to take with
God,
a Paige and Vine.
that is
And
incredible. That is incredible. I'm proud of you. I think that that's
oh,
a
thank
wonderful,
you.
even if it
I'm
wasn't
proud of
your
her.
original goal, it's a really exciting thing to have happen. And I love that your journey is just taking you in these incredible directions. I mean, the story sounds amazing. So you said it's a 2-book deal, and this is the first book. Is the second book in the series, or is it a standalone?
So right now it is a standalone, but I don't know if Paige and Vine is going to make it a series. No characters are involved with Good for Her, but the themes are kind of similar. And I'm not allowed to talk about what that is yet because they haven't announced it.
Sure.
But I asked them a few weeks ago, I said, is that going to be part of a series or are you keeping it a standalone? And they didn't tell me. So
Yeah.
it may be one of those things where I find out right along with everybody.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let's
and
not
that'll be
get you in trouble on the podcast. So
no, no,
you can just,
you're
you'll
fine.
come back and talk to us more about that. So when it comes to a story like that, I think I just find it really interesting when you just create a new world, a new book, a new story. And it can almost seem like a silly question, right? Like what goes into it? But everyone's so different. And I love hearing what goes into it. So for you, what goes into creating this completely new world where I'm assuming you've never written about Hollywood starlets coming back and the good for her. So what inspires you, motivates you? How do you do your research? What do you pour into these books?
One of the cool things about writing horror romance is that I can write off when I watch horror movies because it's research. So I do a lot of that when I decide what kind of genre the book is going to be or what the tropes are going to be. I end up watching or rewatching quite a bit of the movies that inspire me. So good for her. It specifically was inspired by I listened to this podcast called The Horror Virgin and it's about horror movies. But one of the hosts, she has a degree in film and she lives in Los Angeles. So she often gives a lot of insider knowledge about what is going on in the industry. And that's kind of what inspired me was wanting to show the insider part of it, the darker side that you don't necessarily see once the movie is made. So it's really, I take inspiration from quite a few places with each book too, because each of my horror romances, they kind of have different vibes. So I really have to focus when I go into one of those worlds because they're all standalones. So it's not as easy as just continuing on with the same mood as the one before. If I've got a more serious piece, I really gotta listen to more serious music or darker movies and stuff like that. It just depends. But I do
Yeah.
get pretty like immersed when I'm really into writing.
I love what you said about immersing yourself. And I want to touch on the topic of music for a second. So, what is your process? Every time you write a book, are you creating a new playlist? What is inspiring you? Where are you finding your music inspiration? And are you sharing the playlist with all of the books?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. With every book, I start a new playlist. Even I've done that from the very beginning. So like, if you really wanted to go read my backlist, if you find my Spotify profile, which is public, you can see every one, every playlist. But I do share them in the front of the book most of the time. If you don't see it, it's because I forgot it. And Paige and Vine, my publisher, they're posting about it too, about the Good for Her playlist. I will say for Slasher Pass, this is kind of like more of a funny thing than anything, but I didn't put this on the playlist because it would be really very, very weird. But for some of the scenes where like, for instance, the very first scene we see Constantine, spoiler, but he's going and killing people. To get in the right mood and mindset for that, I found a playlist on Spotify where it's just people from horror movies screaming. That's it, just on loop. So for that afternoon while I was writing that scene, that's what I listened to was like 3-4 hours of just people screaming horrifically to the sounds of like creepy piano music playing in the background. And I almost put it on the playlist, but I was like, no, because that would just kill the vibe of the rest of the music on there.
I should be putting that in the background for meetings at work. I will keep that in mind to set the tone. Well, it's so funny. I was thinking as you were talking about this new book, when I lived in Los Angeles, I lived in the apartments where all the Hollywood starlets used to live when they first got to LA, and their agents would put them there. And one thing that my roommate at the time always thought was strange, she's like, as soon as you walk in the door, something kind of bursts in the apartment. And it's almost like that movie Poltergeist. There was like an electrical burst. And she would always say, like, the TV turns on or a light bulb pops or something like that. And it's just, you just felt a presence. So anyway,
Wow.
I just thought it, and we were always replacing light bulbs. But anyway, it was probably just faulty
Oh my
wiring.
gosh.
But it was really interesting how Cahuenga Pass, that whole area, it's right underneath the Hollywood sign. It's just an interesting place, has a really rich history. And I love that you're writing about that. I'm going to devour that book. I can't wait till that comes out. So hopefully you'll be able to come back and chat about that when that's about to be released.
I would love that.
Good, because I can't wait. I can't wait to hear more about it. And I'm excited for your journey and learning more about this traditional publishing journey and what that's like for you. I mean, as you said, I want to retire 40 years from now as a writer. I was thinking, like, yes, that sounds about right. That sounds amazing. And I would love to hear more as you go along and like what that process is like. I think for so many people, that's the dream. And to be making that a reality is a massive accomplishment. So I'm just really excited for you. But one of the
Well,
other
thank you.
things I wanted to talk about today was recently you posted something on Instagram that just really gave me pause. And obviously, you're talking about your own experience with creativity and writing and your own journey. But I thought it really applied to almost anyone reading that. And I thought it could really resonate for a lot of people. And I know we still have your love letter coming up, but I wanted to just drop into that space for a moment and talk about
Yeah.
what made you want to put that out there and share that? Because you were very raw and honest, and it almost felt like a little bit of a personal inventory, but you were sharing that with us, which is really generous. So, what made you want to do that?
Yeah. Well, I was looking at Instagram reels and someone who they weren't even in the bookish space had done something similar. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do that because one of the things I need to be doing right now is growing my Instagram following. And I think the best way to do it is to be showing my face and showing my authenticity, that I'm like a real person with real feelings. That's one of my goals currently, so that people like recognize me and root for me a little bit, you know. And so I had that video, like just like I was looking really good that day, so I made like a bunch of B-roll, and it was just sitting in my dress. I was like, okay, I can use this one this time. And I talked a lot about my publishing journey and how I'm a big believer in the road that you have to go through these things to get to where you should be. And sometimes like things that you thought were going to be successful aren't as successful or not at all. In my case, quite often it was just not at all. But you have to learn from it and accept that that's okay, because eventually you're going to get to where you need to be, which is how I feel. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but Slasher Pass was like my 12th or 13th book. And before that, I had written 7 Rockstar romances, 3 vampire books, and a Goblin King romance, and they all flopped. And when I really think about that experience, it was because I was trying to be someone I wasn't. I was trying to fill boxes that other people had told me I needed to be in those spaces, or that's how I needed to write this book. And I wasn't being my most authentic self. But then when I finally said, you know what, I'm done doing what other people want me to do, I'm going to write a book for myself. That's when I actually had a breakout book, and that was Slasher Pass. And it was such a freeing moment then. Well, because I felt it wasn't just like me just putting what I wanted on the page. I had also done a lot of work to do Slasher Pass. I had read a lot of books on marketing and books on how to write to market. And I read my comparables authors books. I had done a lot of work to get to Slasher Pass, so it felt really, really good for that specific book to be the one to be successful. But also, I look back and think, I've had to have those failures in order to get to where I am now. And that's okay. I'm still doing that. Like, I had to write my Gatsby novel that I knew wasn't going to be as very as successful. To me, my Gatsby novel is kind of like my goodbye to indie publishing. I may still write a little bit of indie publishing. I'm not saying goodbye completely, but to me, it felt like a really good goodbye as I switch over to some traditional publishing.
I'm just taking in what you're saying, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us because I feel like it's a part of the conversation that usually gets whispered. And it's only after people feel really confident with how it's packaged, right? We don't share those parts of it. So to have you just openly and honestly say, looking back on it now, I wrote all of these books and it was important that I did that, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we can dismiss our journey if it's not the highlight reel. We all do that, right? We're human. And in a social media age, we're taught to do that even further, to really self edit. So to reflect back on that, and I always think about that person who at book 6 would have stopped because they didn't get the reception or feedback that they wanted, or they listened to that internal voice that might have said, there's no room for you here, or whatever that is for you,
Yeah.
right? Like it's different for each of us. We each have that like playing in our head, and the voice sounds different. Sometimes it's our voice, sometimes it's someone else's voice, but it's telling us those negative things. And so I think it's a really important conversation to drop into when we're talking about being creative and putting yourself out there and to continue pursuing it. And I feel like that's probably why your Instagram post spoke to me so much, because I did feel like you were just really humbly reminding people that it's a journey, it's a process, it's part of your life, it's a body of work, it's a huge composition. It's not just the highlight reel. And it was a reminder of listening to that inner voice, that authentic voice, and not shying away from it. Right. And I think I had like a very same, but different experience even with my work. I've had the mental health podcast for a very long time. I used to be a psychotherapist. That was what I did. And then I had this call to step away from it and do something I just love, that lights me up, that brings me so much joy, which is talking to authors and other creatives. And you can bet that there was a voice in my head that said, don't do that. Why are you
Mhm.
doing that? That's not your space. That's not where you belong. That's not your background. So I love having these conversations with other women and just sharing those stories, because I think that we need to. I think it's really important. So if you had any hesitation about that Instagram post, just know that I was fangirling over it and I saved it and I loved it. So I really
Oh, well,
appreciated that
I'm
you did that.
glad.
It was a good way to
I
get
think
to
it's
know
very
you
important.
too. Really, really get to know you. So I think it's really interesting that it came out when you were talking about wanting to be more present and show yourself more. And I just thought it was such a beautiful way to get to know you.
Oh, well, good that it's working then. Because yeah, I often feel like sometimes I always have this worry that people think I'm very stuck up, or like I just am not interested in being friends with people. I don't know. Maybe it's just like my own personal worries. But that's kind of what I'm working towards, showing the community that I am more welcoming and I am wanting to be more open. And I very much am a big believer in the almost. I almost did this, but because this didn't pan out, I got this opportunity, or, stuff like that.
Oh, I think someone's going to listen to this episode and it's going to hit the exact perfect time when they need to hear it, right? Like, we don't know where these things come from. You can't kind of organize that, but when the messages come through, they are really impactful, and it is important to hear, and not just hear once, to hear it often from people who are doing the things that they love, that it's also okay if not everything is a bestseller, not everything gets you the audience you want, there's still space for you. So I just really appreciate that
Exactly.
you're having that conversation because it's important. I want more imperfect stories. I feel like the flaws, the nuances, all of those things, they bring up so much and they make us think and question. And I don't know, I think it's pretty inspiring. So, in a world of AI and algorithms and all of that, to have the real humans showing up and showing their process is pretty important.
Yeah. And especially with social media too, like you said, you get the highlight reel. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people that that's the only thing that they are interested in showing, which is like fine, but you should be proud of those things. But there are people who get really bad comparison itis because they're only seeing the highlight reel. They're not realizing that they could be that person
Yeah.
in time because that person's just not showing you that it took a longer time than what they're showing. A lot of people have that potential. You just gotta see it, I guess. Or I'm just trying to be inspirational. I don't know if it's working.
No, I hear what you're saying because I'm actually a big believer. Like, the power of having something modeled for you, the power of watching someone do something and thinking, oh, I can do that too. I could probably do that myself. Or if they felt safe doing it and it didn't go perfectly, it could probably happen for me too. And maybe I won't be devastated if it doesn't turn out the exact, like, I will survive.
Yeah,
Sometimes you just need to know that someone's going to be okay on the other side of it. And it can sound silly, right? Somebody could listen to me right now and be like, are you really waxing poetic about a podcast? No, it's like sharing parts of ourselves, right? And
yeah,
we can get really self conscious about that. And then what do we end up being? Just these people who are only showing perfectly curated snapshots, right? And we're not sharing the whole story. We're missing out on everyone. So I really love
exactly.
that. Exactly, right? Like, we want all of those things because that's the meat of the stories. Like, even as you're talking about your characters or I'm talking about them, it was all the little nuances, right? All the little details about them is what makes us love them. And yet we want to self-edit. And so
Yeah,
it's just really important to give each other breathing room to do that. And it's one of the things I love about this podcast is I get to talk to people about their journeys and not just the highlights, all the things that went into it and what inspired them. Because I mean, I had no idea you and I had so much in common, and I'm thrilled about it, to be honest with you, because we in middle school were apparently doing the exact same thing. So I love that.
yeah, I know.
And
I love meeting another VC Andrews reader. It's always like it's so fun.
right, and why were we reading those books at that age? I have no idea,
Oh,
but
I know.
apparently I dove in, I just was like, "Oh, these tortured little worlds she creates, I love it." So, I'm not shocked that I'm still a reader. But on that note, I would love to hear your love letter. And for anyone who's new to the podcast, I always invite my guests to write a love letter to either their younger selves or to their readers. So I'm really excited to hear your love letter today.
Yes. So you gave me the option of it being to my reader or my younger self. And it started off as my reader. And I think as it progressed, it turned into a little bit of talking about, my journey and like we had just discussed the post that I had made recently on Instagram. So, dear reader, either seasoned whore baby, those are my readers, or freshly off slasher pass, welcome. My journey, while almost 7 years, doesn't feel like all that long until I look back at where I started. I was so hopeful with my draft stars. I had the tragic backstory, the romance arc, and the story beats down. I poured my heart into that first book. And then nothing. And you guys told me why. At first, I didn't listen. I was adamant that just hadn't reached the right audience yet. It had nothing to do with the unpopular tropes that were in the book, a heat level that was not sweet, but it wasn't spicy either. It surely could not be the cover that was not to market, or all the stuff that would have elevated it to a level people would read that was removed by my editor. You guys told me all of these things that were wrong, but I just wasn't ready to listen. And then I moved on to vampires, and I did the exact same thing. And then I had one more flap with my goblin king romance. And I finally got tired. I said, okay, it's been 5 years. Maybe I should listen. So I paused and looked around. I bought a bunch of books on how to publish to market. I read my comparable authors, the authors who were writing books that I wanted to be like. And I listened to the readers when they spoke. And then I listened to the most important reader, which was myself. I spent 5 years trying to be someone I was not. RWA, which is the Romance Writers of America, I was a part of for a very long time. They told me I needed to fit into this very specific box. And then Book Talk told me, what box? And then I looked around and agreed. I didn't want to be in this little space anymore because I shouldn't have been this whole time. I had spent a long time trying to figure out how to blend my love of horror with my passion for writing romance. And I used to tell other authors quite often that if I could write any other genre, I would write horror. But I knew I couldn't because every time I tried to write a horror story, it always ended up a love story. And then that's when it clicked. Let's do it. Let's do the love story. That was also a horror. Let's try. Let's stop listening to people who weren't my readers telling me what I should write and publish and market. I put my foot down and said, this is what I'm going to do, and you're not stopping me. And that's when Slash Your Past happened. And you guys noticed my horror babies took me in, lifted me up, and they still cheer for me each and every day. You read my horror romances, or you read my horror romances and said, this is where you should have been all along. Now don't move. You horror babies, you made videos, you made art, you cosplay as my characters, you made custom special edition books, you write reviews, you signed up to come see me halfway across the country, and you've got tattoos of some of my books. But most importantly, you're telling others how much my words affected you and made you see the world a little different. And because of your commitment to helping others see what I could do, my book made 6 figures last year. I got to the top 3 in the entire Amazon store. I landed an agent who then landed me a traditional publishing deal for a flat list book. And that's just the start. I don't know what the next 7 years will look like, but I have to thank you for helping me through the first set. And that is my love letter. Thank you guys.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for pouring so much into that and just giving us so much honesty. So I just really appreciate you. And I'm glad we got to meet you and learn more about you and what makes you tick and the things that you're working on. So, Tylor, where can people find you and connect with you? Do you prefer website, newsletter, social media? What would you like people to do?
I'm on everything. You could find me just about everywhere, but the most up-to-date information is going to be on Instagram. That's where I spend the most time. So I really encourage people, and for a more selfish reason, publishers are looking at that Instagram following. So please give me a follow over there. I would appreciate it.
Great. I will make sure to put links in our show notes so people can always just kind of connect right through there. So, Tylor, thank
Yes,
you
please.
so much for joining us today. I really mean that. I love talking to you. I love taking a little trip down memory lane to all the things that inspired both of us, apparently. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I hope you come back soon, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandmixtapes@gmail.com.